Yes, champions. I am here with Ben. I don't actually butcher your second name, mate. Is it Uzokwe?
Do you know what? That was a really good goal. Yeah, Uzokwe is not Uzokwe, but I just say Uzokwe. It's a bit easier to
Uzokwe.
pronounce. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, mate, thank you for coming. And yeah, if you just want to give everyone just a quick intro to yourself and yeah, what you do.
Yeah, brilliant. So I'm Ben, boxing strength conditioning coach. I work with boxers permanently, like say online and look like all over the world. I used to box myself, and I think as an amateur boxer, I found like the struggles with strength and conditioning, sort of like the education, sort of knowing what to do. So I think sort of like every single, let's say like mistake when I sort of like work with fighters, I definitely like made myself. And then from there, like 7 odd years ago, stopped boxing, went away, invested into my education, went to university, got a master's degree in strength and conditioning. Been fortunate enough as well to work alongside and learn off like the great box science team, and that brings me from where I am today, like hopefully having a positive impact in terms of like the boxers what I work with, and then just putting the message out there. I think one key thing that I try to do on my social media is give as much free stuff out there to sort of like help boxers, because again I know like when you're new to boxing, if you've not got as much experience, it's been quite hard to sort of finding like what to do with your strength conditioning. I think a lot of boxers have the boxing performance, that's all box off. They've got the boxing coaches, but there's a lot of information out there in terms of like the strength conditioning, the physical performance. So it's hard to sort of narrow down what to actually do and how to sort of progress in that aspect. So it's one key thing what I sort of look to and hopefully have a positive impact in the sport.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing I have found now is that obviously a lot of the boxing coaches, the people that own the gyms, they're still very much stuck in that old school way of thinking. Just run a bit further, train a bit harder. Like there's no real science with regards to their actual coaching, with regards to performance. So yeah, well, what's your kind of background been? So obviously, I say you had a few fights. You stopped through injury, right?
Yeah, so my last fight, unfortunately, like I suffered quite a bad concussion. I was doing quite well before it as well. I was pretty gutted, but I had a head clash. Still got, I don't know if you can see on there like a little Harry Potter scar to
Yeah.
go with it. But a concussion from a head clash. And then this is something as well. What there's not much research in, but I developed something called post-concussion syndrome. So I had loads of brain scans. My brain was healthy, but it's like your body still reacts as if a concussion is still there. So for like 6 years, I still experienced symptoms of concussion. I had like chronic migraines, tension headaches that were just constantly there. But luckily, say like the past year or two, they've just sort of gone like since then. Like the last year, I've not experienced any sort of symptoms, but it's something that I feel like my body's just developed over time. But it took about 6 to 7 years. It was quite
Wow.
challenging, but I feel like it's probably if anything, when I think of life, it's a journey, isn't it? So it's been a setback there, but then potentially I wouldn't be helping boxers today if I was still boxing myself. So it gave me that time to sort of step away from boxing for a bit, invest more into education, and that sort of brings me where I am today.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that's very much overlooked, isn't it, in boxing? Is that kind of the recovery with regards to injuries and also, I guess, injury prevention. But was there any reason that the doctor gave you for why they think that was kind of the case, that you kind of suffered from that? And I'm guessing that's quite a rare disorder.
Yeah. So in terms of the doctors, I'll be honest with you, there wasn't anything they sort of could underpin or underlie. Like a lot of the stuff in the research I've done in terms of like learning about it has been stuff I've gone away myself, I've invested in courses, done a lot of research online, because obviously at the time wasn't bothered in terms of like what it cost. I just wanted to get back to
Yeah.
boxing. I just wanted to get over that and get on with my life. So in terms of, I think like the actual hospital and like the NHS and stuff, I think it's something that's not really that understood. Their sort of go-to method for me was sort of like medication. For years I was on like high doses medication, but I think if anything, it probably had quite a detrimental impact. But yeah, it is quite uncommon. But I have actually worked with and spoke to a few boxers recently, when I've like put my journey, put what's happened to me, and they've reached out to me and been like, right, I've suffered with the same thing. It's like even boxers what I sort of train with, I think they've had it for like a few months or whatnot. So I think it's something that's not necessarily understood, but it should be something what I was obviously everybody should be more aware of, especially in terms of like your return, because I know myself as like a young fighter, you're like, right, I want to get back to boxing, and people can probably get back to boxing a little bit too early, as opposed to letting the body recover. So I think it's something that isn't fully understood, but hopefully for me in the future, people are more aware of it, and people are more aware of sort of like how to manage it, deal with it, and people have that help and support out there, so they're not sort of left to their own devices and leave to deal with it with themselves.
Yeah, did you have to do any like bad weight cuts or anything for that? Was that like dehydration much of a factor in your fights, or did you always walk around like fairly close to weight?
I think for that, to be fair, it was a last minute fight. I've never actually reflected upon this, but I did get it, I think, within like a week before. It's the fact that got postponed. It was just after the Christmas period. So obviously, I
Yeah,
think, well, I'm going to enjoy myself
yeah,
over Christmas. I'm going to enjoy myself. So it was like a last minute fight. Off the top of my head, I might have had a 2 to 3 kg to cut over a couple of weeks. But even myself, I wouldn't advise that for any amateur boxer, because you know yourself, like same day weigh in, really you don't want to be doing any sort of weight cuts because you don't have that time window to rehydrate, refuel, and perform. So that's something I've never actually thought of, but it definitely could have had an indicating factor.
yeah, definitely. There's a really interesting book called Damage, and it's all about kind of CTE in combat sport athletes. Yeah, it's very intense, especially for someone like myself who had quite a lot of fights. It makes me just think, wow, I need to start investing in some real neurological testing and help there because I've been punched in the head a lot. So with regards to kind of
Yeah.
your work that you guys do over at Boxing Science, how do you guys manage weight cuts there? Because as you said, obviously you don't want people to be dehydrating lots, and some of the pros nowadays cut substantial weight. So yeah, how do you guys manage that?
I'll be honest, it wouldn't be really me that sort of has like a massive insight to that. Lee Ricard's nutritionist there, he does a great job with all the fighters. But I think a lot of the sort of things, the themes what I've gained from it is sort of do more like a gradual weight cut, just so it doesn't have a detrimental effects within your performance. Because I think even pros for like the weigh-in before, if you're cutting massive amount of weight, it's still probably not the best. And it's probably still not the best solution. So I think Lee's sort of methodology is sort of like gradual weight cuts throughout camp, and then obviously you're going to have more of a intense weight cut fight week, but that's something you sort of limit as much as possible, but you manage that through like glycogen, carbs, fiber, all the other stuff. Then sort of the last thing to sort of come is your body water.
Yeah, yeah. So talk to me then about when boxers first obviously come sign up with you. What do you find are some of the most common misconceptions that you have to try and change with regards to a lot of your fighters with their thoughts on kind of performance and things like that and strength training? So like the biggest
I
misconceptions
think
and myths.
it's a tough one for me because there's always the argument in terms of like people look at people say like Floyd Mayweather that does the long runs, like all the old school fighters had success within the sport, but by still doing what say S&C coaches can sort of theme as not the best solution or not optimal. But it's sort of changing the mindset in terms of giving them sort of like a structure, a program, something different where they consistently see progress. Because I find within myself anyway, when I used to box, and I think this happens with a lot of fighters, they'll try something and then they move on to the next thing, and then they'll try something else, and there's no real structure or like say program within the training schedule where they can see consistent progress in the physical performance. So as opposed to just sort of choosing, like seeing going on Instagram, I'm going to try this, then I'm going to try this, because obviously with a boxer, you want what's best for you. So a lot of the time, people will try everything as opposed to just sticking to one sort of solution and one sort of plan. So I'd probably say that really, it's like shifting the mindset in terms of sort of like trying to do everything. Every session has to be a hard session, as opposed to, right, I'm going to have a structured program what I'm going to follow, and then if I stick to that consistently, that I'm going to see progress.
Yeah, definitely. It's getting that kind of quantitative feedback so you know what to adjust and move forward. And about testing, do you do testing often? Do you test at all with your fighters?
Yeah, perfect. So at the start of every single program, I'll do like call it like a combat performance assessment, assess series of like different physical attributes, and then I've got like a lot of data what I've collected myself, and what I've seen online as well, and I'll give them some feedback on that, so I can be like, right, this is what you're great at. This is what we could potentially improve on, and it helps me for programming as well, as opposed to sort of just giving people generic programs. Everybody gets a program catered towards them, but then I do find still like, and that's the benefits of having a coach there. You might start something might not work for yourself, something might need adjusting, or just say like the gym or the setup or whatnot. So then you still got a coach there to have that feedback with and to sort of make adjustments as you go through with the plan. But yeah, I think testing is key, I think, because it gives you one, that personalization element. So you're giving people the exercises what they actually need and the qualities they need to develop. But then two, I think it's great for a fighter at the end of the day, like when you've done the first 12-week block with me, they can be like, right, I've increased my performance on this area, and this. This is what I want to work on next. And I think a lot of things with boxers, it's that confidence. They know that they've got a fitter. They know they've got stronger, more powerful. So I think tracking data is 100% important.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So with say a lot of the guys that come to you and after that initial assessment, a lot of them do. What do you tend to find are the most common weaknesses within boxers? What do you tend to find? Is it overall strength? Is it anaerobic fitness? Where would you say what tends to be the biggest downfalls? Do you say in most fighters?
I think boxers in general, because they do train very hard, they're generally very fit, but potentially not as strong, or as not as strong as their potential. Like a lot of boxers, when they get in the program, they make like really good strength gains, and that's just because due to the lack of exposure to strength training. It's like with anything, when something's new to you, you're going to adapt at a very good rate, and then over time, that's when like the programming gets a little bit more complex. But then we look to make like them small 1% adjustments. And then one thing what I found as well in terms of like core strength is potentially with some fighters like a lack of rotational strength. So one thing what I found within my research and my dissertation is that rotational strength, so that's how much force your obliques, the side core muscles can train, side core muscles can produce, that's one of the biggest contributors to punch force. But like you yourself, being in an amateur boxing gym, a lot of the core training is just sit-ups, crunches, and there's no real rotational element. So I find that one thing what fighters seem to improve pretty quick on, or definitely improve on when they start the program, is the rotational strength, and that's again due to sort of the lack of exposure to them types of exercises.
And so on that then, because obviously majority of the people listening to this will be boxers, what would be your top kind of three exercises that you would be using with your fighters in the gym to really kind of optimize that rotational strength and rotational power?
I think the best one, what I would probably say, is like an isometric rotation. So you can do this like a few ways, a few different variations, but this is basically pushing against an object as hard as you can without actually moving. So I think one good one, what I tend to do, say with like amateur boxing group sessions, just because you need no equipment, is just you hold your hands out there and your partner is pushing into you, and you've got to produce that force into your partner. You can do other variations of that. You can do like kneeling variations as well. You can do that against a wall. So I think this is great as well. Say going into say like your boxing sessions for your boxing warm-ups to get them obliques fired up. If you just prop yourself next to a wall, sometimes you can have like a mat or a medicine ball in between, push against it as hard as you can. Or say if within a gym, you can do it with a cable machine. So stack a cable up more than you can actually move, and then rotate as hard as you can. I think with exercises like that as well, because they're not common in gyms, you might get like a few looks or whatnot. But I think for me, it's just like, who really cares? Like, you're training to go toe to toe and go to war with somebody, so you've got to do what you've got to do, haven't you?
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. So looking at when, obviously you were saying when you were younger and you had kind of a lot of misconceptions out in your training, and that's essentially you're training yourself to perform better, obviously when you were fighting. What were the biggest things looking back at your training that you used to do that you're just like, that was just silly?
I think one of the key things, and I reflected on this recently, I actually tried. I had a picture once, but I've not been able to find it. And I was going out for a run. I had, I think, a 10 or 15 kg weighted vest on. That would have been covered within a sweatsuit, a big bag underneath, and a mask. On one of them, do you know one of them, the ones that sort of restrict your oxygen intake,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and a mask for
I've
that.
got a very similar picture. Like there's like three of us standing there, we're doing little hill sprints up this hill in Richmond with these little masks on. Yeah, the altitude training masks, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I think it's hard because it's hard to even call it a mistake, because I think it's just that there's a lack of education out there, and I think hopefully going forward now there will be more education. I think boxing strength conditioning, I think I give a lot of credit to boxing science for like the exposure they've had, the impact they've had, but it's been something still relatively new. Like boxing science, I seen one of them the first to have done it within like the UK, and now obviously they have like a global impact, but it's still relatively new. If you look at say like other sports as football, athletics, like they've probably had S&C coaches for a number of years. But now I think this is something that isn't fairly new to the sport. So I think over the next 10, 20 years, like even just now, you're seeing people and all like the top fighters value their S&C and the strength conditioning a lot more. So I think that's just going to keep on growing and hopefully having more of a positive impact within the sport.
Yeah, definitely. And so, with regards to your kind of approach to training, how do you balance kind of training load and recovery? Because again, I know one thing looking, let's say, back at my training, a lot of it was, as I said, like your coaches are just like train harder, train harder, train harder. And I think probably 99% of boxers live on that very fine line of like overtraining, kind of under recovered, don't they? So yeah, how do you balance that kind of training load and recovery with your
Yeah, a
fighters?
lot of it is just programming and being more systematic about it. So at the start, what I'll always do is get everybody to give me sort of their training schedule, like work commitments as well. Because say if you're a labourer, you're on your feet all day, that can definitely have an impact on your recovery as well. And schedule it around that. So one key thing what we do is schedule like lower intense or active recovery days. So we try not to have 2 to 3 hard training days back to back without having like one lower intense or like say recovery run or recovery session. And then a lot of it is just like communication between the two of us. So seeing how that fighter feels, you could find that they're not recovering as well. So it's like, right, well, we just need to pull back a little bit on this session or pull back on that on this week. It could be that they get like an illness or whatnot. So I think there is stuff we can put in terms of like programming, having like scheduling deload weeks, easier days, but then also it's listening to your body, having that intuition as well that I'm not performing as well in my spars. And for me, that's one of the biggest transfers towards your fight night. So maybe this change session needs slightly changing, adjusting, or maybe something else with my training, my nutrition, my sleep, because there's so many other factors as well that become overlooked. And they think, right, well, I've just trained too hard, but it's like, well, how much sleep did you have last night? You know, what did you do the night before? Did you go out? Well, hopefully not. Did you go out? Was you partying at the weekend? So there's all these other factors of the cake, and that like sort of builds up the bigger picture.
And then, so on that note, how do you structure your kind of training recovery differently when obviously in camp for a fight and then outside of like kind of fight camp?
I think it depends on sort of the fighter and sort of like the commitments and what they've got upcoming. I think with amateur is a good example because they can fight every single week. So I've had it with when people have, they've had a fight, then right, I've got a fight the week after. So it's just making sure that they peak for both of them and peak at the right time. Or if there is a more important fight, I'm going to peak my training off for that more important. So there's going to be like a smaller peak and then also like a bigger peak with there. So we're sort of managing in terms of the intensity of the training. So what sort of stuff you're doing. So as you're coming closer to fight nights, we're doing more explosive qualities, more like speed qualities, not much sort of like heavy lifting. And then obviously when you're sort of further away from a fight, that's when we can load you heavy. We can do, larger range exercises with a larger demand on eccentrics. We can do higher reps, higher volumes that are going to build up potentially a little bit more fatigue. And then as we get into closer to sort of like a fight night, it's like, right, we could potentially be doing longer intervals within our run, like large, higher rep ranges. Because I think a lot of the time, the biggest buildup of fatigue is that volume element. So it's doing quite a lot of work,
Yeah.
a lot of work capacity stuff. So it's sort of tapering that off just to ensure that you're going to perform your best on fight night, because that's the most important thing.
How do you structure that? How long do your tapers tend to be, and then what kind of volume intensity changes do you make as you're kind of coming into that sort of taper week?
Yes. So a lot of the research it shows from like 7 to 14 days. That's when you sort of taper strategy can sort of start. I do mine with a lot because I know boxers will be training hard anyway the week before towards fight week. Like towards fight week, or it could be 10 days before. That's when in terms of the S&C stuff we'll start tapering off. But because we've sort of mapped it out within over like say like a 12-week period, sometimes within that last block there might be a slight reduction in volume, in intensity in terms of like the runs, some of the strength work. So a lot of it will be lower volume stuff anyway. But around 10 days out, that's when I like to write. We're gonna cut back on say like the heavy lifting, maybe move to more like isometrics, but keep it more like ballistic, explosive, speed work, and just sort of making sure that we're maintaining that speed. And I think you should get like a psychological benefit of it, of doing something, and that's something I found myself within my own training, doing something fight week as opposed to, right, we're just going to rest completely. And there's bits of research as well showing that speed can detrain within like 3 to 5 days. So for me, it's really important that you're training speed fight week as well, just so again you're peaking for performance and you're feeling the best. So we can put in like taper sessions, primer sessions, stuff that's got a bit more like sport specific stuff. But the main key element of is keeping them fast, keeping it explosive, because that strength they're going to maintain anyway.
Yeah, yeah, quality. And then how many fighters do you come to you now? They're like maybe 6 weeks or seven left of camp, and they're like, actually, I need to take on an S&C. This is what I need to change. Do you get many fighters coming to you kind of right at that last bit, and you're like, I need a bit of time, please? Yeah, how do you kind of manage that, and how would you approach a fighter coming to you say when they're fairly close to fight night.
Yeah, so I think one key thing is work on the strengths potentially. Like you do get it quite a lot, and it can be challenging. I think for me, I would love every single boxer be doing S&C all year round because, like you know yourself with training, you'll get to a certain point if you say train consistently for 6 weeks, but then if you don't go back to your S&C for like another month, 2 months, then all that progress you made is down. And then as you go back up, you're probably only going to reach that point you was before. So I think for me, I'd advise fighters to do their residency all year round, and that's the best way you're going to enhance your physical performance. So it's just so you're getting obviously like the most out of your training and you're feeling the best. And in terms of like just getting to a baseline every single fight, you'd actually exceed that baseline, and every single camp you're improving. I think that's one key thing what I would like to see anyway boxers do. But obviously, like I understand it can sort of be challenging with commitments. But even if you're just doing like some sort of S&C outside of fights, because you'll see with a lot of boxers, they're happy being in the boxing gym all year round. But like you said there, the rest and see, it's more only when they've got a fight. And you find out a lot with say like pro fighters as opposed to amateurs, because amateurs can get a fight any sort.
Yeah, it's one thing I've definitely found is I don't know if it was almost like popularized by like Ricky Hatton, but people almost take that approach now, don't they? They saw Ricky Hatton do really well and they're like, I just won't train outside of camp and then I'll come back to camp. They'll put on loads of weight and they spend the whole of their camp just trying to cut weight, and that's the thing is they're just kneecapping their own performances as a result of that. It's crazy to see it, but it's such a consistent sight in the boxing gym.
100% hard as well to sort of comprehend for some people because they think, well, Ricky Hatton that had that much success, and obviously was a phenomenal boxer, had that much success, living his lifestyle like that. Look at even like Floyd Mayweather will put on Instagram and eat yourself eating burgers, partying all night. But these are like once in a lifetime athletes as well. And I think times are changing, so people are prioritizing the strength and conditioning a lot more and the physical performance than they did back in the day. But like for me, if all the elite fighters are doing it, if you're not doing it now as well, then you're going to get left behind in that regards. That's the way I sort of see like boxing in the future going. If you're not prioritizing that, these elite fighters all will be. And potentially, I think with boxing, it's important because it's, you know yourself, like you have split decision losses, close fights where there's nothing really in it. And that could be the determining factor. Like, did I live my life right in between the camp? Have I enhanced my physical performance as well as my boxing performance as much as I could have? So I think for boxing, it's a short career, but if you're doing these things, like during camp, outside of camp, it definitely will have a positive impact and potentially give you more longevity in the sport as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's like that old saying, isn't it? Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. So it can just be that a little bit extra that you put in that helps you pip a fight.
Exactly. I think it's a combination of both hard work, but then also smart work as well. So it's coming into the gym, obviously working hard within your sessions. But I think a key thing, what's, like differentiating people in the physical performance now is, have they got, an S&C program, what they're following, and yeah, are they making good progress in that as well?
Yeah, definitely. So like coming to the end now, I want to give people a few little just easy take home. Guessing that obviously majority of the people listening to this are going to be boxers. What are your three kind of key exercises or three things that people can work on in the gym that is going to help improve just their general performance, but then also, I guess, improve their punch power?
So I'll give you a few of them. So I think number one, I think this again is something commonly overlooked. It's something what I did myself when I used to box, is having no sort of mobility or integrating no mobility within your sessions. Like the boxers I work with, I try to get them to do mobility definitely before every strength and conditioning session, but ideally before every boxing session as well. Like you'll see most boxers, because we're always punching, you'll see them, a lot of them, they'll be very tight through the shoulders, they'll have the hunchback boxing posture. But I think in terms of from an injury prevention perspective, definitely. But then also just being an all-round better athlete. If you can move better, you're going to move better on the ring. You're going to perform better within your strength and conditioning sessions, potentially in your boxing sessions as well. But then that transfer of force from your lower body towards your fist is going to be a lot better as well. So I think mobility can definitely improve your punch power. I think another thing what people can integrate is plyometric training. So loads of research again showing harder you can jump, the higher, I got that wrong then. The higher you can jump, the harder you can punch. That's because, yeah, I know, I was close. Jump height, that's developed, that's determined by the lower body's ability to produce force quick. Think of a punch, I think research it's like under 200 milliseconds you've got to produce all that force. So I think integrating some jump training, plyometric training, that's definitely going to help benefit your performance from like a hip stability perspective as well. So with that landing, that's going to help you keep shape when you're punching, but then also produce that force fast to be an all-round more explosive athlete. And then I think third, just overall strength training. So again, there's research showing low body strength. That's one of the biggest contributors to punch power. So just making sure you strength training, everyone would advise a strength training twice a week, just so you can make consistent progress. So I think one key element is that we'll have one compound movement in every single session each day. I mean, we'll have one compound movement in every single session, like not each day. That would definitely be bad training management. But we'll have one compound movement in every session, like a squat variation. It's like a barbell back squat. Bot squats are great, or say like a deadlift variation. So I think trap bar deadlift, that's a really good bang for your buck exercise because safer for the lower back, but then you can drive that speed, intent, you can get that load as well. So I think three things are movement, move better, more mobility, plyometrics, get yourself jumping higher, get yourself more explosive, and then also stronger.
Awesome, man. Look, really appreciate you giving me your time. Where can people find out more about you? What your socials? And also, everybody check out his Instagram because his content is.
Thanks, Kieran, man. Appreciate it. Appreciate your time a lot. But yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. Probably the best place to find me at Coach Benj. I am on TikTok. I'm still trying to crack the code of TikTok, but I do post some stuff on there, and that's at Coach Benj Performance. I think there must be another Coach Benj out there. Someone stole my name, but yeah, Instagram at Coach Benj, and then at Coach Benj Performance, and then I do get daily messages. And obviously, again, I know there's a lot of stuff out there. So anybody ever got any questions, need any help with anything, need any tips, just drop me a message.
Sam, well, yeah, like I said, really appreciate you for giving me your time, and yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you, Kieran. All the best, mate. Appreciate your time.